We are live. Good morning. Welcome to the Social Services Committee of Wednesday, February the 7th. For those people that are watching, this is a joint city-county committee. I'll start through the agenda. Roll call. The roll call, I think, has been taken.
The roll has been taken.
And we are one member down. Councillor Garneau is not with us, but we do have Councillor McCreary, who has joined us. A good trade, he says, as an observer. If there are any declarations of conflicts of interest for any items appearing on the agenda, could you please let me know either now or at the time when they come up on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll move on. At this time, I'm going to ask members if there are any items the committee wishes to separate for discussion purposes. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would like items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 all separated. And at some point, Mr. Chair, I would like if we could get it today, an update on Sunrise Villa in light of the fire they had last month. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Miller. Staff nodding, so yes, we can. Thank you for that. Does anybody else wish to see anything else separated? I think that leaves only the minutes. So I think, can I please get a mover and seconder to place the minutes on the floor? Councillor Martin and Councillor Carpenter. Kristen, can we call the vote on the minutes?
All those in favor of the minutes? That carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Could I just, we have a lot of Brantford panelists online, and one of them may be MP Brock, and if he is, perhaps he could identify himself. We are expecting you. Yeah, perhaps if the Brantford panelists could update their names, then we can do it by exception then. Yeah, so if MP Brock is not with us, we will just continue on with our agenda and hope that he joins us. We don't have any delegations today. Can I get a mover and a seconder to waive the rules to allow presentations and questions beyond the 10-minute limit for the presentations we have this morning? Councillor Samwell, Councillor Martin, any discussion? Mayor Davis?
Yeah, generally when we do that, we will put a time limit in. Like, because I assume this means unlimited. But generally how we deal with it, we'll ask that the mover say be extended for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or you can leave it open.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that. I do prefer to leave it open. It's not very often that we have an MP and an MPP join us, so I don't wish to miss any opportunity for their interaction and conversation on the subject of housing. So thank you for that. I will, as chair, just note that. Could I then call the question on that?
All those in favor of waiving the rules? That carries.
Thank you. So moving to item 4.2.1, Brian Hutchings, Chief Administrative Officer, will make a presentation on the Brantford Brant Municipal Housing Master Plan. And this is meant to be fodder for MP Brock and MPP Baumer to address us a little later in the presentation. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I sit here today as the Acting Commissioner of Community Service and Social Developments. Stephen, is the presentation up? There you go. Thank you. So just, we had a report in December regarding the Brantford Master Housing Plan 2020 to 2030. The Housing Services Act of 2011 requires the city of Brantford as its consolidated municipal service manager responsible for administration of housing and homeless services to the city of Brantford and the county of Brant to prepare a 10-year housing and homelessness plan. In October 2013, council approved the Brant Housing Stability Plan 2014 to 2024, but it's under a 5-year review, and we created the 2020 to 2030 plan. If you look at the plan, it requires us as a municipality to try to build 506 units. Both the city of Brantford and the county of Brant are working towards that. It also requires that we look to build 337 units in the not-for-profit or co-op sector for a total of 843 units. You can see the importance of that later in some other graphs. So how are we doing to date? We've built 30 units at Marlene Avenue, 4 units at Sturton and Stinson, about 26 units at Colburn Street West. We're building right now at in Paris at 174 Trillium Way. Lucy Marco is being redeveloped. We purchased that from Wilfrid Laurier University, and we're redeveloping Lucy Marco Place into units. And also next on the agenda would be Scheller Lane, which is we're commencing it now in 2024. So we've done 220 units, about 43 units percent of the way there, 4 years into the plan. So we're right on target. And thus far, we haven't done very well in our not-for-profit sector. Right now, we've just had a report in December. The JCs will be building 24 units at 32 Bridge Street, and we'll be subsidizing those to assist them in their build at 32 Bridge Street. So when we look at our wait list in December 31st, 2023, we've had 1,030. There's a report on this later in the agenda, but we've gone from 1,214 a year earlier, a decrease to 1,030 households. We've done very well. We're starting to see an impact in the builds and also some of the work that our housing stability staff are doing about looking at diversion and finding people homes that necessarily aren't the ones that we own, or also homes in the community that they're finding people locations. So we're doing very well in this regard. However, when you talk to the housing resource centers, both here in Brantford, as well as in Niagara and Hamilton, you'll see they're starting to see different people coming to their door. They're not seeing the regulars. They're starting to see people whose mortgages are up and they can't renew their mortgages. They're starting to see more and more families. And we know this is a bigger issue. Things have changed over the last year with the mortgage rates coming up and what have you. And we're starting to see different trends. So I'm quite proud to sit here today that we've done a great job in our wait list, but I'm worried about the future, to be quite frank. When you look at this graph, this is from 2020 to 2045, and you'll see things peak in about 2030. These are all the affordable housing units, the ones that are 80% of market. They're RGR units, they're rent supplement units, it's everything. And you can see what our plan will do, how it'll attack this, and it'll peak out at 2030. But we start losing those CMHC properties around 2030, 2031 that are 80% of market. So we're actively not only building, we're actively working with developers in our planning departments and in our housing department to try to for builders to build CMHC affordable rents, which are the 80% of market rents. So you can see we're not out of the woods. We're on the right path, but we're not out of the woods. So some of our challenges, Mr. Chair, what we've seen, and this was not in the reports. It was sought at the meeting as a later memo that came out to council. You can see since 2020, the cost per unit. This is about grants. I'm sorry. The average grant has ranged from 0.76% to 49%. We received, and I'll give the city of Brantford and the county of Brant kudos. It was before my time, but they went out and they built Marlene Avenue. Most municipalities were not building housing. And they went out and built Marlene Avenue. They only received a grant for 0.76% to build Marlene Avenue, the 30 units there. But we can see we've had the high of 49% at 177 Colburn Street to a low of 0.76 at Marlene Avenue. And right now we're just looking to apply for grants at Scheller Lane. And we've applied for the house. We spent all the summer applying for the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund, which all we keep being told is it's pending. And you've seen the Prime Minister going around the country announcing all kinds of monies for Housing Accelerator Fund. and we haven't received any of those monies as of yet. So you can see our grants are down. When we did our original projections for grants, we thought we'd get about 47%. I'll talk about it in a later slide, but they range anywhere from 0.76. So it's an average about 12% we're receiving in grants from the federal and the provincial government. In addition to that, and about a year and a half ago, the provincial government came out with Bill 23, and there'll be a loss of development charges that we could have allocated to affordable housing of $42 million. So Bill 23 had an effect on our developments of new housing. In addition to that, it's almost the perfect storm. We've seen cost per units go from, on our original plan, estimated 216,000. And if you remember that, when we came out with that plan, people were arguing about that rates, $216,000, and it was too much, and could we not build things cheaper? And we said, no, this is what it is. And it's gone to $350,000 over almost the last 2 years, an increase of 167%. Our assumption on grants in our original plan in 2021 was 47%, and you can see we've had a high of 49% at 177 Colburn Street West and a low of 0.76. We're seeing an average of 12%. Our new assumption is 20. That's even being aggressive. So you can see we've lost funding. Our grants and the development charge of 42 million. Our cost per units are up. Our assumption on grants are down. And how that has played out for both the county and the city, as you can see, and this is a lot of numbers here, it really comes down to our original plan. We looked at gross cost of building 103 million, less grants. Again, we estimate 47%, so $48,000. And this county, the city county portion would be 55 million, with 15 being from the county, which they've committed to, and 39 being from the city. That has changed. The costs, you can see that the next line says total for the 506 units to build is $162 million, up from 103. The grants were estimated at 27%, at 27 million. So the net city county portion is 135 million, with the county right now 37, almost 38 million, and the city at $98 million to fund these other 506 units. So to do this, and I'll wrap, so you can see the numbers have grown, the grants and the costs have grown, the grants are down, and our ability to use, the city's ability to use the development charges has been eliminated. In addition to that, you remember part of the plan is to use for the 337 units for our not-for-profit co-op sector. We've been working very closely with the JCs and some other people to incent them. Most of them are nervous about getting into the market at this point in time with mortgage rates and other costs that they're seeing cost increases. So like many developers, there's some weariness about entering the market, but we are working with the JCs, and we committed to them to $62,500 a unit to help out, which will equate, if we did all 337 units at this rate, at 21 million. That would be split up in such a way, again, ongoing supports of almost $6 million from the county, in addition to the builds that we build ourselves, and 15 from the city. We have a council motion from December 2019 to commit to the future taxes from 282 Stanley Street, almost $11 million to fund that. I mean, council asked me, how am I going to fund it? This is how we'll fund it, and as well as some savings, some other mortgage subsidies for the city side. Again, talking to the CAO of the county, they have not come up with a financing strategy for this or the other monies either. So in conclusion, Mr. Chair, pre-1999, and I was around, I'm old enough to be around, and I was actually involved with I was in charge of the Niagara region to do the housing transfer in 1999. At that time, municipalities were a distant third party in government housing provision. Some municipalities set up municipal housing corporations, some didn't. Post-1999, municipalities became first in with the local service realignment, the common sense revolution. We became first party. And you can see from 1999 to 2019, most municipalities did not build housing. They did not build affordable housing because where I came from, we didn't build it because it would have increased property taxes. And those people who were actually trying to keep in would have had to leave their homes. So you can see there's been a real large void in building housing from this municipal sector, as well as the not-for-profit sector as well. So we've reached the perfect storm. Costs of construction have gone up 162% over the last 3 years. Grants have shrunk almost 57%, we've seen. Bill 23 reduced our housing development charge revenue by 42 million. The city's portion will therefore increase from roughly 39 million to 135 million, or sorry, 55 million to 135 million, which the city could be forced to sell more assets, which has done in the past to pay for housing. And the county's portion will increase from 15 million to 38 million, which again, the CEO and my discussion with council, you, Mr. Chair, say the county has no plan at this point in time to finance this increase. This will cause the city to property look at other, and also the not-for-profit sector. This will cause the city to use property tax to designate for growth to fund not-for-profit sector housing providers. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's a summary of the report we brought forth in December as you requested. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Brian. That was a very good summary. In order to improve the efficiency of this meeting, I'm going to ask if members of the committee want to add anything. I don't think we need to question Brian at the moment because we've had that conversation before, and I don't want us to deny MPP Baumer the opportunity to come and speak. Anybody like to add to what? Yes, Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, Brian, thank you for an excellent report. When we talk about the builders building market rents, for example, coming to an expiry in 2031, did you not say?
Many of them are, Councillor Carpenter, not all of them. That's how the wave, the kind of the.
And the
wave-
reason that we go to the private sector to build subsidized housing and and provide grants is because we haven't got the full amount to do it ourselves.
Yes, and in combination of, yes, I guess short answer is yes, but we also look at them to provide the economic market rent. I call it 80% of market rents at that. That's really not our strength.
And usually that's about a 20-year contract and then it expires. So that investment is gone after 20 years. Where if we build it ourselves, it's a permanent investment, is it not?
Correct.
So isn't it financially more responsible to actually build it ourselves if we can get the funds to build it ourselves?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just one more thing. The accelerator fund that we haven't received an answer on yet. Would it make sense for us to make sure we have a delegation going to FCM so we can speak directly to the federal minister and the provincial minister about those grants and those funding? I know it's federal funding,
Sure,
but-
yes, I think we should be lobbying the federal government for that. We've had the discussions, the mayor and myself, with MP Brock about that when we meet with him on a monthly basis. But I know the mayor of Brantford has been discussing about going to FCM in June 6th to 9th. I believe it's in Calgary. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Sakoli, I apologise for missing you.
Thank you. That's fine. I do have a question though, for Mr. Hutchings. Given that we're experiencing this perfect storm and the cost of building has gone up and our income is going down and our grants are going down, have we ever explored ways to increase turnover in our affordable housing units?
Good morning, Mary Musson, Director of Housing and Homelessness Services. Through the chair, we cannot increase turnover in our affordable housing units. So what we can do is remove the housing subsidy. So when a household no longer qualifies for their rent geared to income subsidy, then the unit is placed at market rent, but we cannot force evictions.
Perhaps I should clarify. Have we explored creative ways to engage the tenants in our affordable housing units to transition out of the program?
Through the chair, yes, we do try and encourage them. However, what we are observing is what Mr. Hutchings was saying is that because of the economic climate and people's financial considerations, they are not able to transition out of affordable market rent into the private market rent.
Okay. Thank you.
If we can keep the comments and questions to building the picture that MPP Baumer is going to have to address. Is that where you're going, Mayor Davies?
Point of order, I don't think you can restrict our ability to ask questions. If they relate to the subject matter of the delegation, I would respectfully submit.
I will accept that. I'm just trying to run an efficient meeting, but go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to say that I'm very happy that just I'll make a comment, that Councillor Carpenter raised the issue of the FCM. In fact, I do plan on attending FCM to lobby and advocate on three particular issues, regulatory changes regarding CN Rail, the Housing Accelerator Fund application, and increased federal participation in municipal infrastructure projects and funding for municipal infrastructure projects. And, but my question to Mr. Hutchings is, how do we have had this housing program in place since 2019, and we're building, and we plan to continue building. How do we compare to other municipalities? Is there any kind of ranking of, the number of units built, per capita, the number of units planned to be built per capita? I know municipalities love to compare one another and compare themselves to using those kinds of per capita data. Is there anything out there that can tell us, how we're doing comparatively speaking?
Through the chair, to the mayor, what I can say is that we're one of the only municipalities that are building actively for affordable and rent geared to income housing. There are other municipalities who are trying to build, but they are nowhere close to the numbers that the city of Brantford is building.
So you think we're a provincial leader when it comes to that kind of activity?
Through the chair, yes, we are.
All right. And is that because, and Councillor Carpenter talked about CMHC buildings and CMHC finance buildings. CMHC is a federal corporation. It's very much reflective of federal policy on respect to housing. And the focus there is to provide interest-free loans to developers who build these housing rental units where the rent is geared 80% to market rent. Is that a fair summary?
Through the chair, yes, that is a very fair summary.
And it'd be much more helpful for us to build the type units we're building if some of the federal policy were directed away from providing funds through CMHC to providing funds directly to municipalities that are building.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's my pleasure, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to make a note that MPP Brock is in caucus and can't join us at the moment. He's not allowed to take his phone into the meeting, but he hopefully will step out. So you may need to repeat some of those comments a little later. But at this time, I apologize. Councillor Martin wanted to speak.
Thank you. Through you to staff. You said when somebody loses their subsidy, their unit goes to market rent. How is market rent defined?
Through the chair, we do set our market rent at a very affordable rate. So they would still be at the CMHC average market rent at the high end.
At the high end, okay. And is that the same number that's used for the developers that have to do 80% below that?
Through the chair, no, for the developers who do get the 20-year municipal housing facilities agreement, they have to set their affordable rates at 80% of the CMHC average market rent.
Well, my question is the same market rate that's used for that calculation that we use?
Yeah, through the chair, yes.
Thank you.
I see that Councillor Carpenter would like to ask one more question.
Mr. Hutchings, certainly, I want to first give you accolades for your role in this file. We're ahead of the game because of you actually and your previous involvement in housing. The 42 million that the province has now taken from us, and that's from all municipalities have lost that revenue, have they not, for housing? For ours is 40 million to 42 million dollars from the provincial side of it. We haven't got a plan to make that funding up.
No, it's provincial wide issue. Most municipalities have been affected by this, yes.
And
we
you
don't-
said one more thing in there that I think, do you have the dates for, when we were a third party to housing and the federal government was number one, I think the province was number two and we were number three. Do you have dates for those when those changes happened that you could provide us sometime later on?
I can provide them later, but 1999 was a key date. That's when we became first. But in the 60s and 70s is federal and provincial, and then as 80s and 90s became provincial first, then federal second, and then we were always third in those, and then 1999 when it changed over, we took over local responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Looking around, looking at the screen, nobody else wants to speak. So I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome MPP Will Baumer. He is here in person. MPP Larry Brockwood will hopefully join us virtually. The Social Services Committee passed a resolution inviting you here today to speak to the Housing Master Plan. And I hope that Brian's introduction, which I thought was very comprehensive, and some of the commentary that you've heard around the table already will allow you to answer any questions. And also, we'd really like to hear from you what we can expect from provincial government. And we'll start with MPP Balmer, since he's here, and MP Brock is not. Will, good morning, welcome.
Oh, would you look at that? Well, good morning, councillors and your worships. It's good to see you all. I very much appreciate the opportunity to come before you here today. This is my first time here other than as a guest, just checking out the new council chambers, and I really appreciate what the city has done here. And on that perspective, I so appreciate the working relationship that we have going back and forth in regular meetings and phone calls with both city council and county council, and some of the structures that we're putting in place. It's very gratifying to have partners who work so hard. And I don't know exactly where the current rankings are, but to know that Brantford has been continually at the top of the list for housing starts is very, very gratifying to me. And to have a partner like that in the provincial government. I know it's been in the Premier's comments a number of times, thanking Brantford for the hard work that everyone is doing to help with the housing crisis here. And that same dedication has been coming to the social services issues. I would like to beg your indulgence, Chair, because this is social services, just to talk a little bit about off topic of housing, but related to that and just poverty reduction and everything else, because obviously those also play an extremely important role in what this is. And I don't think you can talk adequately about housing if you don't talk about some of the other steps that the provincial government has taken in order to deal with the affordability crisis that we have. So with that, I think obviously everyone needs a home, and Ontario's poverty reduction strategy consists of 3 pillars. And number 1 is to encourage job creation and connect people to employment. Number 2 is to connect the people to the right supports and services to give them a hand in a person-centric model. And number 3, to make life more affordable while building financial resiliency. And that approach is and has been multi-pronged. And so we are connecting people experiencing poverty with training, health, and other supports to set them on a pathway to jobs and financial resiliency while helping people keep more of their hard-earned money. We are helping people adapt to the changing job market to achieve long-term job success and be better able to withstand economic challenges. And we are doing this through a whole government approach that leverages initiatives already underway across government, including a micro-credentialing strategy, which will help people with in-demand skills that prepare them for the jobs of the future, and include $75 million over 2 years to simplify the system and remove obstacles for apprentices to begin their careers. We are improving mental health and addiction services through the Roadmap to Wellness, supported by $3.8 billion over 10 years to create a coordinated mental health system that supports people to reach their potential in all aspects of their lives. Our government has committed $1 billion to build thousands of new childcare spaces in schools over the coming years, on top of the 19,563 new spaces that had already been added as of 2020. In order to continue to bring children out of poverty, our government invested roughly $1.2 billion just last year in the Ontario Child Benefit. And we are investing $90 million to provide dental care to 100,000 low-income seniors. We have introduced the CARE tax credit, which will provide 300,000 families with up to 75% of their eligible childcare expenses. And this work builds on our government's new low-income individuals and families tax, or the LIFT tax credit, which will result in the Ontario personal income tax being reduced or eliminated for about 1.1 million people. The Ontario Jobs Training Tax Credit provides up to $2,000 in relief for eligible expenses to help workers get the training needed for a career shift, retraining, or to sharpen their skills. The Ontario Energy and Property Tax Credit is a refundable tax credit to help low to moderate income individuals and seniors with property taxes and sales tax on energy costs. And our government has increased the minimum wage to $16.55 per hour recently, with an annual increases that reflect the cost of living. We have raised ODSP rates by the largest amount in decades. and we're aligning rates to go with inflation moving forward. And we've increased the earnings threshold for people on ODSP so they can now earn 5 times more than previously and be able to keep that money. And so on that subject with ODSP, we are empowering people with disabilities who can and want to work by giving them a real opportunity to tap into their skills and talents to contribute to their local economy and support their family without fear of losing their health benefits. So we increased the earnings exemption to $1,000, which was a 400% increase, will potentially empower thousands of people on ODSP with the opportunity to fill the 400,000 open jobs in Ontario, and will increase the amount of money that they can earn by 400% without impacting their ODSP payment.
Excuse me, MPP Palmer,
Yes.
are you going to get to housing?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
No, but again, I don't very often have the platform to talk about.
I know, but we
Yeah,
wanted to
the-
talk,
what
we
the-
wanted to talk to you about housing. so please-
Exactly.
please
But
keep
again,
focused.
we can't talk about housing without getting into the other determinants of health and wealth. And then effective in July 2023, ODSP rates will be tied to inflation. And then the homelessness prevention program. The province of Ontario provides funding to 47 service managers and 2 Indigenous program administrators through the homelessness prevention program and Indigenous supportive housing program to help people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And so what we've seen here is that the city of Brantford received over $5 million in 22-23 and will receive over $7 million for 23-24, which is almost a $2 million increase or a 36% increase. And then finally, in the development services sector, when we took office, we were spending $2.4 billion in the development services sector, and we've increased that by 35% by $850 million, just under $850 million to $3.3 billion. So that gets us to housing. We know that we have challenges, and challenges not just in the social housing sector, in the affordability, affordable housing, rent geared to income. It's across the entire spectrum. Speaking to my bank manager in St. George, she has had, and that was last summer, so 6 months have gone by, dozens of people put their keys on the desk in front of her when it came time to renew. And that's why we've had such a very strong approach to build housing, period, across the sector. And which is why we made the changes to the development charges so that we could see that decrease. And so just to have some clarification, I was wondering if I could ask through you, Chair, the $42 million, is that money that was collected to be used for social housing by the city of Brantford? So that $42 million is there, but it can't be used to build housing anymore. Is that correct?
It was to be collected. It was part of our development charge study. When new developers were paying into DCs, it was to be collected.
So
It
what,
has not been collected yet. It is to be collected.
so what amount of money had been collected to build social housing previous to that when it was allowed?
I don't have that number with me. We just did a recent DC study, and the 42 million was to be collected.
So how much have the development charges gone down in the city and the county as a result of the provincial changes?
I don't have that number in front of me, Council.
Okay,
Sure.
so I think that's something that we need to work on together because, again, I think there's ways of developing partnerships where through the development charges and those that are not now being collected, because if the city and the county have not decreased their development charges as a result of Bill 23, where is that money going? And I think we need answers to those questions, because I think you could build those partnerships with people who work in that sector. And in order to, if you have the money in the bank, or if you're not collecting that, then I think that should be directly passed on to home builders or select home builders by those credits through your respective councils, so that you can get the type of housing built that you want.
Let me ask Brian Hutchings to speak, but let me say just from a county perspective, we are just embarking on our next DC charges study. So some of the impacts of Bill 23 may not have played through yet, but will be caught up in the DC charges exercise that we're about to embark on.
Okay,
Brian?
So just be clear, the money is not in the bank. We have not collected it. It's to be charged. And because we can't charge anymore, it'll be a reduction to the builders. So we will not be charging it because we're not allowed to charge for it. It's not an eligible service. So we're not allowed to collect it. So we will not be, it'll be reduction on development charges to the builders.
okay, so there will be a reduction in development charges to builders on that.
Yes, because we're not allowed to collect it anymore. It was in our original development charge study, and we now cannot charge it anymore.
Okay, so I look forward to seeing that because I haven't heard yet of any reduction in development charges to builders. And, you know, with regards to Bill 23, I think what's so exciting about it, especially, and so does that 42 million. And I think that's something that I've been struggling with because we have a new definition of what affordable housing is and who will not be charged for that. And is that also taken into account when those, with the new standards of the definitions of affordable and attainable housing from the province of Ontario that the minister put out last fall in regards to those numbers?
If I could answer that, the new affordable housing definition will not affect this 23 million. In fact, it'll be, if it's the definition may actually limit more development charges coming into the city of Brantford based on that new definition.
Okay, good. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So obviously we have a lot of work to do. I know that the province of Ontario is actively going into a consultation period regarding DCs and how that can work moving forward. And I also know that, and I have been advocating fiercely because we've put $1.2 billion aside per year for municipalities that have been hitting their targets, which Brantford should be eligible for. And I want to see that money coming into this community. I think some of the struggles that we continue to have, and I'm sure MP Brock can speak to that, is you know, the chronic underfunding that the federal government has put into housing. And I'm not here to blame higher levels of government, but that's something that we've struggled with provincially, both on the social housing side because of at least $500 million a year that Ontario is not getting for that, but also for the extra costs that we have from the refugees that are coming into the province of Ontario. Our population continues to grow. I think it was 800,000 new Ontarians in the last 12 months, to quote numbers from the premier. And so we have a huge problem in front of us. So I know that we will continue to work with the city of Brantford on a path forward, and I'm very excited to see the work being done here, and I am more than happy to work with you on that. And I know we have a commitment from the minister and the premier in order to make municipalities whole, and yet I will bemoan the fact that we haven't seen any clarity on that yet, and I look forward to seeing how that will be coming forward. I know that we've also put $200 million aside, which is a drop in the bucket for water infrastructure and everything else. And I know that has to play itself out. And I look forward to seeing how the federal government actually comes to the table in order to work with the province of Ontario in order to actualize seeing to our housing needs. But in the meantime, what I will say, just to close off, is that I really appreciate the incredible working relationship that we have in bringing these forward. And again, just the invitation by the committee to come here and have the conversation because that hasn't happened yet.
Thank you very much, Will. I'm going to hold questions for Will until we have a few words from MPP Brock. MP Brock, thank you for joining us. I know you've been busy this morning, and unfortunately you missed some of the earlier scene setting information. Do you feel comfortable to just chip in now without that background, or would you like Brian Hutchings to give you a super summary? You're muted, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. I don't need a summary. My comments will be very brief. I don't have a lot of time to spend with you. This is my national caucus day here in Ottawa. But I've been having ongoing regular discussions with the mayor and Mr. Hutchings about what more the federal government can be doing, particularly for Brantford Brant and on a larger scale across this country. As you know, the federal government announced a recommitment to the Housing Accelerator Fund. And I know that there have been some announcements across the country, but by no means is this, in my opinion, being shared uniformly and fairly across the country. So I'm looking at speaking directly with the minister and his department about that as to when Brantford Brant can expect to be on the list. We have been making inquiries. My staff and myself have been making inquiries. We've been promised to get a status update from a number of people. But as far as the timeline as to when Brantford Brant will be a recipient of federal funding for housing, that remains to be unannounced. So I will continue to pursue those answers. And to Mr. Boma's point, we take, as the provincial government takes, the federal government takes a very active interest in addressing the housing crisis that we have in this country. It was sad to hear from Mr. Boma about his discussions with his bank manager about people turning in their keys. I'm not only hearing that for the first time in my riding, but I'm hearing that from colleagues right across, reminiscent of the housing crisis that we had in the 80s and the late 70s. So we certainly don't want a repeat of that. We need to take immediate steps to address this. So that's my brief update as a member of the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to open it up for questions. I'll start with Councillor Martin, then Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. First through to MP Brock. You didn't see the presentation, but I'm sure you're aware of the aggressive building program that the city and county have embarked on. But one of the slides showed that with all the builds that we have planned, we end up back where we started because we're losing all the privately built affordable housing where the 20-year agreements are coming due. So in your advocating, can you please make sure that you advocate for the money to come to the city so that we can build permanent rent geared to income housing instead of it going to developers where we get a 20-year deal and then we have to play catch up for that 20 years down the road?
I certainly can, Councillor, and if I could ask you if you could follow up directly with me with those talking points, I will then pass it along to the government. Thank you.
Okay, because a lot of those developers got real heavy subsidies. I think some of them were as much as 80%. And in the presentation we got, we're lucky to be getting 20% on future ones that we're projecting. So anything that we can get will certainly help. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
I'll start off with MP Brock first. Thank you for coming, Larry. I really appreciate it that you showed up. I know you're busy. The mayor is going to attend FCM. Maybe a few members of council. You'd be able to make arrangements for us to make sure we meet with the ministry regarding housing when we get to FCM?
So, certainly, I'll make that happen.
And you'll attend with us because you're going
Yes,
to
I
be.
will.
Yeah, thank you. I thought you would. Thank
Councillor Carpenter, can you give me that date?
I believe it's June 2nd. I'm going to get
June 6th to 9th, I believe.
June 6th to 9th. Yes. Coming up fast.
Thank you.
I know it doesn't seem like it. And one more question for you. Because MPP Boma talked about poverty rates, which I think is really important. I'm glad that he added that into his discussion. I know it was seemed like off topic, but it is all inclusive. Could you look at lobbying for us and as a member of the official opposition to talk about wage increase rates in old age pension, which hasn't had an increase in many, many years, at least if they could just even tie it to the rate of inflation so that we don't see so many seniors living in poverty and an old age OAS.
Councillor, that is an issue that comes up periodically at our national and Ontario caucus meetings. And I'm certainly in a position to continue that discussion and advocate on a greater scale. I'll certainly work with our shadow minister who's responsible for that portfolio and work on a strategy moving forward. I'll keep you informed.
Thank you. And you already spoke about the accelerator fund. Thank you for that. And then further to MPP Bowman, thanks for coming. And to both of you, if we would like to see you maybe, I know that I did it by resolution to invite you here. I'm glad you came. And I'd like you to come to council more often, maybe once, maybe twice a year would be just to give us an update and so we could have some of that conversation back and forth so the community could see how well we are cooperating, because we do cooperate in other things. They just don't see it, but here they would see that. So I thank you for that. The ODSP, well, I want to thank you for that change. I was arguing for that for many years, that we haven't seen an increase in ODSP or welfare rates since your government came to office. And then I've been saying that for quite a while. And then the ODSP rates changed and the ability to earn money changed. That is a game changer for people in ODSP. It's a way to transition, maybe even transition off ODSP, because they get a small job in educating. So but thank you for that. That's very valuable to the community. I've seen it in the community firsthand how it's working. So you can carry that back to the ministry. Thank you for that. The welfare rates, of course, haven't had an increase yet. We could certainly use some of those rates. We could use them at least tied to the rate of inflation, if you could think about that. The property tax rebate, could you tell me a little more about that property tax rebate that for low income?
There we go. I turned it on. Yeah, my understanding is, and please feel free to reach out to my office for further details, but that we will rebate back the nope, where is that? There we go. That's through the Ontario Energy and Property Tax Credit, is a refundable tax credit to help low to moderate income individuals and seniors with property taxes and sales taxes on energy costs. So I think that can be applied through. And so if you know of anyone who needs help with that, just have them reach out to our office.
And I see your excellent staff is here. So maybe what we could do is, if I could ask that you provide some kind of information pamphlets to the neighborhood associations and to the Seniors Resource Center in our community, so they get that message out to seniors. It would be a good way to advocate it out. And your office wouldn't have to do it individually, but they could advocate it out in their communities. They're seeing it all the time. That'd be
Great
great.
idea. Point taken. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Carpenter,
I think
can I hold you over to
Sure.
second round?
Yep.
I think Councillor Miller wanted to get in.
Well, yeah, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be brief, because I know these gentlemen are very busy. And as you can see, we operate in glass houses, so I have to be careful when I throw stones. So, but over the years, and I've been in this business long enough as you have too, Will, and you've seen this steady erosion of funding coming from the feds and from the province over the years. And I talked to Larry on Saturday about that, so I was glad I had that opportunity. I'm not saying anything new, but I got to preface what I'm going to say with this. We rely obviously on property taxes, which are a regressive tax, to fund everything. And I mean everything, whether it's the arenas, the roads, the bridges, the sewers, the waters, all that. You understand that. But like I say, over the years, there's been an erosion of the funds coming from upper levels of government. And we have a report today, it's on childcare funding. And this is not an atypical report. We see this quite often, but I'm going to give you a quote that's in the report. This is from the FCM and AMO. And I'm quoting, they say upper levels of government have created an over-reliance on municipal taxes to fund essential services. Okay, so if you guys don't recognize it, then you've been living under a rock, and I don't think you have been. I think you understand that. So over time, in the affordable housing, it's such a big component. It's an expensive component, and we're asked to put that on the property taxes. It doesn't seem right, and I don't think it's right. There's a lot of other things that social services deals with. And Will, you mentioned childcare funding, how many spaces you created. But here in Brantford, we have a report how the province is reducing the administrative services, and that's the cost to run it, by $646,000. So in 2025, we'll actually see our property taxes increase to maintain that service, because you have to have somebody to run it. So that's just a very, like I say, very typical example. But having said that, I will say that municipalities, while it's tough to fund these things because we rely on property taxes, they are, especially in regards to social services, we are best situated to deliver a lot of those programs because we're closest to the source, right? Whether it is affordable housing, whether it's childcare, anything that's social services, I find that municipalities can deliver them best, but we need help, okay? We need help. And like I say, we're not completely blameless. There's lots of blame to go around, but we got to stop. We got to reverse what's been going on for the last few decades. So, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, if I could, through you, Chair, to Councillor Miller, I haven't seen that report. I know that our funding towards childcare continues to increase substantially over time. And so I look forward to seeing what's going on there and getting to the bottom of that.
Item 5.3 today.
Are there any other first-time questions? And if not, I'm going to invite Councillor McCreary.
Chair, thank you very much. Welcome, guys. And MPP Bowman, I do thank you for bringing your most excellent staff today. The handsomeness in the room has exploded.
If I may comment, we're only as good as the people that work for us, and I am very blessed,
Absolutely.
sir. Thank
We
you.
have a bunch here. So Councillor Martin and I were in the room once when a famous man once said, the first step to filling in a hole is to quit digging. I wonder if you could comment on the numbers of foreign students in Canada and the impact that has had on housing shortages.
I don't have comment on that. I know in conversations with Laurier that they will only offer positions to, because I had that conversation 2 days ago, and the topic came up, and they will only offer a position to a student if they can also give them housing also, and that's through the Wilfrid Laurier International College. And I have not had that conversation with Conestoga.
I wonder if MP Brock could comment as well.
Yeah, Councillor, are you, is the question focused on Brantford Brant or on a grander scale?
No, Mr. Brock, it's focused on the policies and practices of the federal government.
Okay, so anecdotally, I don't have data to support this, but through our national caucus discussions, we have representatives all across this country, and we're hearing from them that notwithstanding the position that Laurier Brantford is taking, many of these higher educational institutions, college and university, are teetering on collapse. The domestic student quota is not there. More and more higher educational institutions are relying upon foreign students to fund the operations on an annual basis. And the connection between accepting the exorbitant tuition from a foreign student and the placement of a suitable housing for that student is not necessarily always there across the country. The government of Canada is aware of that. They claim that they're taking steps to address that. I know the immigration minister is taking steps to address that by making a quota in terms of the number of international students that will be allowed into this country, and making it a precondition that a student will only be allowed entry upon a guaranteed placement of some type of adequate residency. We're just hearing horror stories across this country where international students are forced to live in squalor conditions, sometimes setting up tent operations in the middle of winter, resorting to all kinds of criminal activity, being victimized. It's a horrible experience for these students to experience in this country. So, as I say, the government of Canada claims that they are alive to the issue and are taking steps. We just hope that they will follow through on that and we'll see results.
I would hope the opposition would follow up on that as well, Larry.
So Councillor McCreary, if we could keep our focus on Brantford Brant housing, if that's possible.
I believe I was. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And one final comment, which is not directed at housing, but I would like to congratulate MPP Boma on his interjection of a wee bit of humor in saying that water investment was a drop in the bucket.
Okay, I won't go there. Councillor Carpenter.
I had that on my list too. Well, I'm a very big fan of puns, so I like the drop of the bucket comment I did. A suggestion for MP Larry Brock. Individuals that sell their properties, for example, a duplex. I recently sold a duplex. Now I'm gonna have to pay capital gains of that. I'm fine with paying the capital gains, but here's a suggestion for the federal government that those that say, for example, sell 2 units and if they reinvest that money into building 4 units, so more units than they sold, it would be an increase in units. If you could allow them to use their capital gains as part of that development, the government loses no money that they wouldn't have had otherwise, and they get more units at no cost. And they'll still get their capital gains down the road when the original,
Yeah.
the next property is sold. Just a suggestion. It seems.
Counselor, that's a wonderful common sense solution to address a small way the housing crisis. I can certainly pass on your suggestion to our leadership and to the shadow minister responsible and advocate for that type of option. Thank you for that.
Yeah, because the mom and pop investors are probably the majority of landholders. And the other thing I'd like to suggest, talk to Will about in housing, is we've got a lot of the real estate investment trusts that have been buying up apartment buildings, doing reno evictions explicitly or not maintaining the buildings at all. I have a number of them in my ward that are falling into disrepair. Or the second thing they're doing is trying to charge the existing renters parking space for their visitors. So they're charging by the hour, $2.50 an hour for someone to visit. So when I have a senior in a rental building that and it's a private sector rental building, but they've been there a long time. So their rents are affordable for them. And then all of a sudden they've got to pay PSW workers or healthcare workers have to pay $2.50 an hour to park there. They're not going through the city, so they're actually can't really legally collect that money, or can they not legally, they can't legally tow the vehicle, but they threaten that to all these are real estate investment trusts all through the city are doing that. Second comment I would like to have to raise to your attention is a number of individuals are deciding that what they would do is convert rental buildings into condominiums, do a little bit of a facelift, rent them to turn them into condominiums, sell them off, even at a lower rate. But that means those individuals there have been living in those units for a long time are now on the street looking for housing. And they can't afford it because they've been there a long time. Their rents are really reasonable. So those are issues that are happening probably across the province. If they're happening here, they're happening elsewhere. Just want to bring that to your attention. I think that's all I had, and just thanks for coming.
Noted, and thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak a second time? Seeing nobody. Oh, Councillor Martin, you just slide your hand up and I just don't quite see it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through you to MPP Bouma, the same question I asked MP Brock about the fact that we're basically treading water, even though we have an aggressive build program, because we're losing so many that were in the private sector. What can you do to help us, get some of these subsidies back up and make up for the lost development charges, so that we can afford to build the aggressive build we have and continue it, because we only end up back where we started at the end of this process.
Yeah, so if I can just ask back through you, Chair, I know when I sat on this committee as a county councillor, we had a program where we were selling off our assets to the people who are residing in those. Is that still the case?
For the single family units, yeah, that aren't really appropriate for affordable housing. That gives us more money to put into multi-unit buildings. So it's very cost effective to do that for us.
And at the time, it seemed the direction that it was felt at committee that it would be best for the municipalities to get out of owning that real estate. Was I mistaken on that, or are you suggesting that the social services through the county and the city want to get back into quite a large space as far as being landlords?
Well, we are in a very large space as being landlords.
Right, but you want to grow that instead of.
We want to use the money from, say, 3 single family homes to build 6 or 7 units or 8 or more units for the money we get from that. So it's increasing the number of units by selling ones that aren't efficient.
Okay, no, good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
See no more arms raised. I would like to thank MP Brock and MPP Bouma for joining us. And I think to Councillor Carpenter's comment, it would be, I think, very helpful if we saw you more regularly and we had this ability to exchange views. I think if you can go away with a couple of thoughts, one is that Brantford brand is leading in this area. Despite the fact we're leading, there's still a huge challenge, as Brian Hutchings outlined. And municipal affordability is a real challenge. And I think you need to, at both levels of government, reflect on how much you load the municipalities. So we would like you to advocate on our behalf to change that balance between what we have to pay and what is given from us. I think specifically the DC charges issue, Will, is going to be important. And I think if we could just share a little bit more information with Will, both from the city and the council, as to where we are, what the impact of Bill 23 will be for developers, but also what it will be for municipalities, that would be really helpful. So once again, thank you. I appreciate you both busy and look forward to seeing you again. Will, you have one final comment?
Yeah, if I could just a feeling from the councillors and mayors in the room and online. What is the vision for what development charges should be? What can I take back? Because I think part of what we're trying to do here is development pays for development. But does that mean that for a new home buyer, that that development should pay for someone else's new home? Was that ever the vision for what development charges should be? Because I thought parks and fire stations and sewer and water and the maintenance of that infrastructure, but is the purpose of development charges, and it may have been allowed, but what is the vision here at the committee for what is the purpose? What can I carry back with me to Toronto as a message of, is the purpose of development charges to, in a sense, tax a new home buyer to build affordable housing?
That's a good question. I'm going to ask Mayor Davis if he wants to comment on that, and then Councillor Carpenter, and then Councillor Martin.
It's an interesting question. So development charges are intended so that growth pays for growth, so that growth pays for the pipes that have to be put in place to support that housing. But also as the city grows, the demand for subsidized housing grows proportionally. Because you know that as the city grows, you're going to have an increase in the demand for what I call RGI units. And RGI units are rent geared to income. That's for people that are, say, Ontario Works or ODSP, or they're seniors on very fixed income. The private industry is not building for them. We at the city, with the download of Common Sense in 1999, we build those units. And so as the city grows, the demand for those types of units grows. So that was why we were able to build that in based on the Development Charges Act into growth paying for all of the implications of growth for a city. And the projection was about 42 million over the next 10 years. And so when we can't collect that money from development charges to build housing for those most in need, we got to find it somewhere else. And it could be through property taxes, debt, selling other assets, or the federal and provincial governments giving us, setting up a grant program that would contribute directly to municipalities that are constructing these kinds of units like Brantford and the county of Brant. An example of that is 177 Colburn Street West, which we just opened this past summer, where the federal and provincial governments came together and paid half the cost of that building. But then you see other builds where the contribution from the federal and provincial governments is less than 1%. It's very, very difficult for municipalities to be able to plan and finance the construction of these. These are the most needed units for those most in need. And we're always trying to find ways to finance it. As I said, development charges was a technique allowed by the Development Charges Act. That's gone. And so we now have to find that $42 million somewhere else. And that's the reason why.
No, and that's why philosophically, I'm just throwing the question out there, not expecting an answer today. And I can see landing on both sides. It was, I think, the ministry's opinion when Bill 23 was passed, and the government's opinion that that is not a burden in an affordability crisis with housing prices what they were and are. And even though they're coming down somewhat, to put on a new home buyer in the development charges, that's one opinion. There's different opinions. And so that's why just to leave the question with you, I'm intrigued by that what is the best place to put that? And because at the end of the day, there is only one taxpayer, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal. It just depends whose books gets to look better at the end of the day. And and I hear that. And but just I guess what we're talking about is what's the best place to put that burden? Is that on a new home buyer when we're in the middle of an affordability crisis? Because yeah, the developer pays that, but we know that the buyer of that home will eventually pay for that that tax for rent geared to income there. Or is that something to put on the regular tax base, or is that something that should be fully covered by higher levels of government? And we can have that conversation, but I'll leave that there.
Councillor Combs, do you want to
Yeah.
add to it?
I do, because, well, you seem to have a misconception on development charges, and that's why you've asked the question. I appreciate it. We often, when we're doing development charges, we'll have the home builders come to us and say, well, that's going to put a big strain on building houses. You know, the price, it's going to put the price of houses up. That's just not the case. The price of the house will be whatever the market demands, whatever the market rate is. So when houses went up to 900,000 or 700,000 in this community, cost of building them didn't go up that much. It went up, but didn't go up to the $700,000 range. It doesn't cost $700,000 to build a 1,000 square foot home today. It may cost $5, but the development charges don't put the price up. So what happens when the price of houses, when someone's looking at a raw piece of land, they look at the land, they say, how many houses, how many units can I put on there? And what does it cost to build them? And what does my profit margin need to be? And that determines the price of the land. So when we raise the price of houses, the owners of land are making the initial profit. Home builders still make profit per house, but the development charges do not land on the buyer of the house as per se, and they don't affect the price of houses going up. I would like to add one more thing, because the province is talking about more houses and limiting development charges to encourage more building of more houses. Well, let's build more 1,000 square foot houses instead of more 4,000 square foot houses. Then we'd have more houses, period. There's no need to have 4,000 square foot houses built and subsidizing those by waiving development charges. So the taxpayers are picking up the cost of development charges. So you're putting the cost of building houses back on the property taxpayer by doing that. So development charges isn't exactly, it's a science. But there's rules against this provincial legislation, Development Charges Act. So the legislation of what we can put in development charges is very clear in the legislation. And we have to go through a very strong consultative process to determine what goes into development charges. So it really is development paying for development, whether it be the library has to be increased. And I do say that the federal and provincial government need to get back in the game of funding housing, but let the municipality build it and run it because we are more efficient. No offense to the provincial and federal government. We're just more efficient because we're closer to it, as Councillor Miller has said. Thank you.
Will, you can take that away as more info. Final bit of input from Councillor Martin.
Yes, thank you. There was a time when affordable housing was built with 1/3 from the federal government, 1/3 from the province, and 1/3 from the municipality. And as you've seen in the report, we're getting less than 20% on a lot of the builds that we're projecting forward. We got to make up that lost money somewhere. It would be far better on income tax that the federal and provincial governments collect, but you both cut us off. We got no alternative but to go to either our tax base or the development charges. And it's the people in the municipality that pay that. Either they pay it with the purchase of their new home or they pay it on their taxes every year. It was far better to put it on the development charges instead of raising property taxes. Because yeah, affordability is a big issue and the price of the house is significant. But if you raise people's property taxes too much, then they're forced out of their homes anyway. So the people turning in their keys, the increasing property taxes is one of the things that they're faced with, along with the increased mortgage, increased food cost, increase in their transportation costs to get to work. And a lot of that is affected by the carbon tax, which is a regressive tax again, but
No, I
we
can't
gotta make up that
disagree.
money
and-
somewhere.
And absolutely. And burying that in a development charge is much easier than facing a 10.6% tax increase like the county is right now. And because you'll hear about that, whereas you won't, as we've heard, you don't hear that so much from a new home buyer if you put an extra $5,000 or $10,000 in there in the development charges. It's a lot easier as a municipal councillor to bury it there just a question of appropriateness. And, but I'll tell you what, if you can get 30 or 40% from the feds, because I haven't seen it,
Well, we're not getting it.
I'll go to
from
bat,
either level of
I'll
government.
go to bat for the 30.
I think we'll leave you to have that conversation with Larry. Final question from David Miller.
Just a comment, and it's part of the reason we've invited MP and MPP here today. And well, that's a great question about the development charges. Great question. I will say one thing about development charges, they're fair and consistent across the province, no matter what municipality you live in. What isn't fair and consistent is the grants that come from the federals government and the provincial government for affordable housing. Because some places you see a project, great fanfare, and it's getting 80% funding from those two levels of government. Other ones, you've seen it earlier today in the presentation, it was less than 1% towards an affordable housing project. At the end of the day, and I don't know if we can ever do it because humans are involved and humans have biases, but we would really appreciate to see a little bit more fairness across the board as far as these grants go. And that's part of the reason we asked you guys to be here today. And
So that's a great closing note. So recognizing your time constraints, once again, thank you, MPP Baumer. Thank you, MP Brock. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to declare a 2-minute recess. Now we're going to go live in 30 seconds, Mr. Mayor. Wherever he is. They normally is badly. Okay, we're going to get restarted. And the committee will now consider items that were separated for discussion purposes, starting with item 5.1. I think, Councillor Miller, you were responsible for separating this one.
Yes, I was, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and you start reading these reports and you expect the same old, you know, things getting a little bit worse, but there seemed to be some unexpectedly good news in that report, so that was encouraging. My question had to do with what's on page 6 of the report, page 10 of our package. It's regarding the number of applications. They had 915 applications. Of those, 600 were ineligible. My question is, what's the most common reason for rejecting these applications? Because that's a 2/3 rejection rate.
Through the chair, Katie Moss, Manager of Housing Programs. There's several reasons why an application may not make it to eligible status. Some of the legislated requirements that applications are required to have at times are not submitted with the application. For example, proof of Canadian citizenship, proof of their income. So that comes through a notice of assessment through the CRA. If applicants are unable to produce these things, we're unable to activate and deem them eligible on our wait list.
Just a follow-up question, Mr. Chair. Okay, so lack of Canadian citizenship, they don't have their proof of income. Is there any way we could let the applicants know before they start the process that these are the requirements? Because it seems like a lot of work to go through 2/3 of them only to reject them. Is there any effort to try and get that number down so it creates less work?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. The application itself does list very clearly what legislative requirements need to come in with an application in order to make it active. It's quite a lengthy process, and some of our applicants don't have, for example, maybe they haven't completed their income taxes or unable to access their notice of assessment through the websites or, you know, the process that they need to follow to get that. We do have staff assisting with this. We do have people who, you know, are helping applicants figure out how to get this information, where to get it in a timely manner, and we are flexible with when and how it's submitted. We try to encourage, remind, reach out, notify if an application is about to be canceled. But at the end of the day, if the documents aren't submitted, we are unable to activate the application.
Okay, I appreciate the answer.
Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Brian Hutchings and staff. I appreciated reading this report as well, and I agree with Councillor Miller in saying that there's a lot of good news in this report. 225 families housed in 2023 being the highest since 2018. That's really good news. Applications are on the decline, lowest since 2018 or more. That's great news. It sounds like our supply and demand issue. It sounds like we're catching up. It's a little bit. It sounds like the supply side is catching up and the demand side is maybe going down. What I wasn't clear on, and I think if taxpayers were to read this report, maybe one thing that's not clear is how then do wait times end up increasing? And my secondary question is, do we have any anecdotal observations on the homeless numbers within our communities? Are we seeing any change in that? And I'm not completely clear if our observations are that most people who are homeless are on a waiting list, or are there some that don't bother? I just wonder if you could speak to those points a little bit, and thank you again for the report.
Through the chair, I will start answering your question, and if I miss anything, please re-ask it. So to speak about the waitlist timelines, yes, the waitlist timelines are increasing for housing. There are so many factors that lead to this. One is that households have the ability to choose as many or as few buildings as they wish when they apply to the centralized wait list. So if a person only selects 1 or 2 buildings that they wish to reside in, their wait list time will be much lengthier than a household who selects 5 or 10 buildings that they would like to reside in. So when you do a matchup of where people would like to live, and with the reduction in people moving out of housing, the turnovers in our units are taking longer. And so folks are waiting longer times to get into affordable housing that is from the centralized wait list. We have been able to house more people because of the increase in new rentals, such as 177 Colborne Street West, and also because we did receive an increase to the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, which is a portable housing benefit. So staff have been working very diligently with people experiencing precarious housing to try and get them into the private market rent with the portable housing benefit. So this ties in with your question to with regards to people who are experiencing homelessness. We are working very closely with community providers, the Housing Resource Center, as well as the Encampment Outreach Team. And one of the biggest projects we have in 2024 is ensuring that every person or household experiencing homelessness who is on the by name list, which is how we track people who are experiencing homelessness and are touching the coordinated access system, also have an active application on the centralized wait list. So there are 2 different wait lists, and we want to make sure that people who are eligible to be on the centralized wait list are on the centralized wait list. With regards to the number of people experiencing homelessness, from the 2023 PIT count, we have roughly 250 people or families experiencing homelessness. We are targeting to do another point in time count in the fall of 2024 to see where we are at with that.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, please do.
Thanks. Back to Mary through you. So the point in time count last was 250. Can you tell me how that would have compared to maybe a year ago? And thanks for the answer on the centralized waiting list. So if a person, obviously a person who checks off all the, they would go into any place, would have a shorter wait list. And if somebody has said, I'm only interested in being able to go to this place and this place, they would have a longer time waiting. So I appreciate that context.
Yes, through the chair, you're welcome. And in comparison to 2021, so the point in time count was conducted every 2 years up until this year. So from 2021 to 2023, we did experience an increase in people who were experiencing homelessness during the point in time count. And we will be doing another count in 2024. So we will have comparative figures for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Councillor Celeste.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was kind of surprised to see that almost 25% of the people on the wait list are from outside of our area. Is that typical of other cities, or are we just an anomaly?
Through the chair, we have not done an environmental scan to see if it's typical. However, I can say that people who are experiencing homelessness or who are looking to move into rent gear to income housing are oftentimes encouraged by any support staff to apply to multiple waiting lists in any community that they would be willing to move to. So it is quite common to see people who are precariously housed in the Hamilton area or the Niagara region. If they have the ability to move to Brantford, they will be applying to the centralized wait list in Brantford, in addition to the wait lists in their own home communities. Also, people who are experiencing domestic violence, human trafficking, they might be wishing to leave their home community as soon as possible. So those would be applicants to our centralized wait list as well.
Do local folks get any type of prioritization?
Through the chair, the only prioritizations for the centralized wait list, we have the special priority program, which is for people or households who are experiencing domestic violence or human trafficking, and the urgent priority status for people who are chronically homeless or they are precariously housed and they will be homeless within 30 days. There is no priority for anyone who is just local to the area.
Okay, and just finally, back to the disqualification. To prove citizenship, what document does an individual need to prove citizenship? What is acceptable?
Through the chair, the types of identification required would be a birth certificate. It could be on a permanent residency application, could be a claim for refugee status. So any of those documents are considered proof of citizenship or attempt to become a citizen, and that would make an application eligible and active.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Sikoli, you're next.
Thank you. Mary, I have a question. Given how many people are on the wait list that are from outside of Brantford-Brant County, do you know of any discussions that have ever been had about, say, a provincial or a regional wait list?
No, I'm doing this for about 25 years and not familiar with that. It's usually done by municipalities. And to further to your question, but also Councillor Celeste's question, it's very common to have people from outside the community apply. It's just the same reason why people move here from the GTA. A dollar stretches further in Brantford than it does. So if you're on ODSP or Ontario Works or mainly ODSP, people will try to leave the city because a dollar stretches further in Brantford or Norfolk than it does in Toronto.
Well, I fully understand why someone in that desperate state would apply to every municipality in hopes of obtaining housing. I just thought it might, if that discussion were to happen and if something like that were to materialize, it might give municipalities a better snapshot of how many people are actually waiting for affordable housing. Right now, we don't really have a clear picture of how many houses we should be building provincially or municipally. And I've always just wondered if there was maybe a better system to help us decide how many houses we actually really do need to build. So thought I'd leave that right there for now, maybe cycle back to that later. Thank you.
And by the province downloading this in 1999, it's given away that provincial planning. It's done by 47 CMSMs, 47 service managers, and we don't have that connected provincial system.
Yeah, I understand, but everything starts from the bottom and builds in some way. And through these discussions, perhaps there's a better way for all of us to work together. Thanks.
Mayor Davies.
Yes, wondering if you can share, clerk can share figure 2, centralized housing wait list, showing the trend from 2013 to 2023. It's page 12 of 40 or page 8 of the report for 2024, 2022. Page 8 of the report, page 12 of 40 of the consolidated agenda. There we are. What a nice little graph this one is. So, you know, it's interesting when you look at this graph. I think it demonstrates in pretty simple terms a couple of different factors. One, we see the housing wait list, and I think many of us use the housing wait list as the barometer or thermometer of where we're at in terms of two communities in meeting the housing needs of those most in need. You know, this peaked at 1,720 shortly before 2 municipal elections ago. And so the previous council, with the mayors working together in a various task force, you know, we got together and created an action plan around 2019. And, you know, you can see at that time the wait list was going down. So that wasn't because of we were building, because at that time, kind of, we really weren't building. But it's because of the fantastic staff we have here that really have done a great focus on supportive housing, helping those that are on the waiting list or have just come onto the waiting list, accessing other housing options they might have available to them. And they've done a fantastic job. Much of the decline is due to the great team that we have here, City of Brantford, County of Brant. But isn't it interesting when you see 2021, see it begins a very steep decline, it like kind of plateaued from 2019 to 2020, 2021. That's I think it probably plateaued because that's really when we were getting serious about following through on the Mayor's Housing Task Force recommendations, planning for, the 177 Colburn Street, the Stearns, and now that we're actually building, I don't think there's any coincidence that we're seeing, a rapid decline in an improvement, let's call it an improvement in our wait list. So this is a great graph. I think it shows as confirmation to us as a Social Services Committee, those of us who are on the past councils, those of us that served in the Housing Task Force, to see that, we can see tangible, visible, positive results of our efforts to address the housing problem in this community. Have we solved it? Not by a long shot. Are we making progress? This graph tells us we are. How are we doing it? We're doing it through a combination of building, elected officials that are concerned and make this a top priority, and also just a great team of housing staff and social services staff that are working for us. So great to see this wait list graph. And I think it tells generally, I think, a really positive story, and hopefully we can continue our efforts and we'll see improvements in this graph.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's worthwhile, just that very slide, the line underneath it said, there's still 1,000 people looking for homes. And to Councillor Coley's question, most of them are from the City of Brantford or the County of Brant. So it is a local problem. It's still a big local problem, and we have to keep working at it. Councillor Sess, you want to speak again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions through you to Brian. Brian, we deal in households, but do we know how many actual people are on this list?
It's a good question. It's not 1,000 individuals, 1,000 households. And I'll turn it over to Katie or Mary. Katie?
Through the chair. So applicants come in as households. So if it's a family with, a child or two, they're counted as one application. So I don't have a number of the actual amount of people that would be sitting on this wait list, but I could certainly get that for you if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Yes, thank you, Katie. And just secondly, when I look at the breakdown, it's 45% families with dependents, 38% seniors, and 30% singles or couples with no dependents. But that totals way more than 100%. That's about 111%.
I presume you can be senior and single. Maybe that's the answer.
Okay, is that what it is?
I'll let staff answer that one better.
Through the chair, it's probably a typo. We will go back and just double check the numbers for you.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. I'll address some of the comments earlier. So the 25% that are from outside the city, because they can apply to any household, any list in the province, it's some of that's, I think, our own good work. So when the graph that was shown earlier, let's not advertise that graph. Let's be careful about the ribbon cuttings that we do and the photo ops that we do as politicians, because that goes in the paper and then people in Hamilton and elsewhere. So, oh, Brantford's got new housing built. I better go on their list. So we're marketing ourselves to communities outside us when we do that. And we don't, that's not our intent, but that's what I see happening. Most people realize that Brantford's a good community and Brant County is a good place to live, as was said. So that's the question I would have is this, when you talk about the 146 were housed from the COHB, that funding, is that Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, is that funded by both the federal government and the provincial government? That's the rent subsidy, right?
Through the chair, the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, it's a provincial benefit, so it's funded through the Ministry of Finance. It's administered by the municipality, but all of it's funded through the Ministry of Finance, and families do not have to deal with the city once an application is submitted on their behalf.
So that comes from the province.
That is correct.
Okay, well, that's good. We've been good to thank Will Bowman for that when he came forward for that. So the number that we have on it, the high number that we have, when you talk about 146, is there a limit on how many people can apply to that? Is that why that number is so high?
Through the chair, yes, there is.
There is a limit?
There is a limit.
How many people can apply? The province allows so many per capita? How does that work?
So through the chair, we get a funding download every fiscal year for the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, and we can put applications in for households until we reach the maximum. So we just got notice from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing last week that the city of Brantford has reached its maximum allocation for this fiscal year, and we need to pause applications until April 1st.
Okay, and when we look at those numbers, how are those numbers in relationship to other municipalities? Is it a per capita thing? How is the province deciding what our limit is? And does our MPP have some say if we need to increase that limit?
Through the chair, if I recall correctly from the homelessness prevention program investment plan, it is determined by the Ontario Works caseload. And so that is how the funding was determined for the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit for this area. So each of the 47 CMSMs would get a different allocation based upon that.
No, so
Councillor Carpenter, we've reached your 4-minute limit, I'm told.
did you? Okay.
Are there any other first-time speakers? If not, I can come back to you. Seeing none, we'll come back to Councillor Carpenter.
Quickly then, so that how that number's realized is not just Ontario, Ontario Works. If you're on ODSP, you still qualify for that geared income, or even if you're not on any of those programs, can you still apply?
Through the chair, you can. It is made for low-income households.
Yeah.
So anyone who qualifies for placement on the service manager's centralized waiting list can apply for the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit. You do have to qualify for the centralized wait list in order to access it.
So based upon your income? So
It is
low income would be able to apply. And then that money gets paid to private sector landlords.
The money gets paid directly to the household, and it is up to the household to ensure that they pay their rent.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call the vote.
All those in favor of item 5.1, centralized housing waitlist annual update? That carries. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 5.2. Again, I think Councillor Miller, you separated this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. There was $225,000 set aside to do an asset management plan for our housing, social housing. It looks like there was only one bidder. And it looks like that bid, if we add 247,000 to that original 225. Reading between the lines, it looks like that bid come in at 472,500. I would like to confirm that number before I follow up with my next question.
Through the chair, Clayton Paye, manager of housing initiatives and residential assets. The total is just shy of that. I believe it's 457 from the only bidder.
Okay, Mr. Chair, could you explain, could staff explain what's the difference there? $25,000?
That would be contingency.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so it was one bidder. You put it out to tender. There was one bidder. It looks like Hairco Inc. from Windsor. That's where they're based. I'm sure they're a good company. Has staff thought about perhaps reissuing this tender?
Through the chair, unfortunately, due to legislative requirements, we do need to have an asset management plan completed by July 1st of 2024. So any further delays in issuing another request for proposals will put us in a position where we cannot meet that legislated deadline.
Just, okay, so I just wouldn't mind just chasing this rabbit for a little bit further. What other municipalities have to go through the same process? I'm just wondering how come we only had one bidders? Or is every business out there that's doing this are so busy with other municipalities? Is there anything staff could shed on this? Help explain why we only seen the one bidder from Windsor on this? I'm very curious.
Judging from industry partners that I know of, it's a quite extensive research to do. They have to research all assets. And it's typically going to be bidded to people in the local area. This is not while the dollar value is high that we can see, it's not a high dollar value for these larger engineering institutions to travel to Brantford to conduct a review. So the people that successfully bidded are reasonably local to the area. And there's not many large engineering outfits in this area that could conduct such a review.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin, then Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through you to staff. When the tender was put out, was there any kind of a number attached to it as to what we were expecting bids to come back at?
So through the chair, back in 2023, we did put aside $225,000 in capital. Unfortunately, that was not enough for the RFP.
But did the bidders know that's what was set aside?
I would have to go back to the bidding documents. I'm not quite sure what was put into the bid documents.
Okay, because if that was in the documents and we're essentially doubling it, it might be well to put it back out. If other firms know that we've increased the amount, they might be willing to put in a bid that's competitive with what's there instead of knowing they couldn't compete at the lower level. But if the number wasn't there, then we have to go with the one that bid. Thank you.
Councillor Compton?
Yeah, we all like acronyms, so I'll call it CAMP, Capital Asset Management Plan. Now, who's qualifies for doing a capital asset management plan? Is it just engineering firms? Are architectural firms not also qualified to do the same work?
Through the chair, there's different regulations. So with this bid, there's an engineering firm as a sub-consultant to the asset management planning company. So the company that is doing the asset management plan has all the certifications for accounting and reviewing the financials for it, while the engineering subcontract are the ones who will do the actual auditing of the buildings themselves.
So an asset management plan here is very much, I'm familiar with condo asset management plan. So is it very much like we look over the buildings, you look at how old they are, when things are going to be need replaced, at what time, and you build a budget of what that costs to maintain that asset is and how much money's in the budget and so forth?
Yes, and with this one, because there's so many buildings, the scale of it is quite large. Also tied to this is a energy modeling plan to determine if what assets we have are either consuming too much energy or in line with what we want through net zero policies and whatnot. Yes.
Okay, so like the energy management plan is something new that be added to this that I wouldn't normally see with a condo asset management plan, for example. But in condo asset management plan, there are literally hundreds of companies around here that do that. And condos don't seem to have a problem getting asset management plans done. So I'm just curious, as Councilor Miller was, why we're going all the way to Windsor and we couldn't get anybody to bid on it. That's a concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sless.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, along the same line, how did we come up with a $225 estimate or $225,000 estimate? We seem to be able to justify why it's so high, but how do we justify putting in 225?
Through the chair, that was the estimate that was provided by staff back in 2023. Since then, prices have increased. So unfortunately, I really don't have another more detailed answer than that.
Okay. If we go back out to the market, I think you indicated we wouldn't be able to meet legislated timelines. What's the penalty for not meeting them?
I don't believe I don't believe there is a fiscal penalty. There's just a requirement by legislation that we meet the deadline. So we don't have a good answer for that, Councillor Sluss.
Okay, I get, Brian, my only concern is it almost looks like extortion. It's just a huge number, based on what we thought we should be paying, or at least somebody thought that's what we should be paying. And yeah, I would give you one that, things have gone up, but this is a 23, estimate, and we're just in the second month of 24. So it's not that old of an estimate that it just seems so far out that something doesn't appear to be kosher.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. And I want to go back to my other answer I just gave you, just something just triggered in my brain. In our, with our other estimate with Public Works estimate with Mike Abraham's group, when I've asked the question internally with staff, the issue is if we don't have an asset management plan, we're not eligible for grants for the provincial government. For many of our grants, for instance, we work with the BPS and trying to get their asset management plan up to speed. And they ask the same question, what happens if we don't do it? We can't get grants from the provincial government because they won't provide any more capital money for us. So but that's the issue. It's not a fine or penalty. But back to the original, when we're getting into this, the 225 was provided. So we now have staff that, you know, Clayton is an architect. He didn't tell you that, and can have more technical skills than we did before. But yes, we weren't happy with what came back on the open RFP.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Any other first-time speakers? Seeing none, I think Councillor McCreary, you'd like to speak?
Sure, thank you. Well, Councillor Sluss asked my patented question about penalties, and thank you to the councillor for that. I'll ask my other question. Does this actually add any value to the corporation of the city of Brantford or to the county of Brant?
It does add value in the fact, I mean, we're doing it across the corporation. Housing has kind of been last in. I said Public Works been doing it across the corporation, and housing's been last in. It's been kept a little bit separate. It does give us some asset value as to how we plan our capital projects for the future and how that's planned out. But it does provide value with that, and does give us a value of what the land properties are worth to keep investing in.
Does it give us $500,000 worth of value? Previous answer was too good to not follow up. I'll take that as a no. Thank you. And lastly, does the province provide any sort of additional funding to us to meet their onerous requirements in this respect?
No, they do in the opposite direction. They don't provide funding if we don't do it.
And is this not something that the asset management department at City of Brantford could look after for us?
The housing has worked very closely with the asset management, and they're doing this. They're doing, Mike Abraham's team is using outside work as well. This was kept a little bit separate, not sure why, but we're now working very close with that group, and Mike is helping oversee this a fair bit with Clayton, manager Clayton Pear.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I will ask the clerk to call the vote.
All those in favor of item 5.2, increase to the capital budget for asset management plan. Thank you, that carries.
Thank you. That brings us on to item 5.3. Again, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to introduce an amendment at the appropriate time for this item. It was a very timely report in light of our MPP coming today. It's unfortunate that we've had such a big reduction in administrative services that we have to go to our ratepayers to pick up that in 2025, but I'll commend staff for doing what they can to get that figured down. My question is regarding the $10 a day spaces. I'm watching the news. I see there's more than a few daycares across the country that are not able to maintain those spaces because of cost pressures. Are we seeing any cost pressures on our local operators to maintain these spaces?
Good morning, Michelle Connor, Manager of Children's Services and Early Years with the City of Brantford. Locally, the province has provided emerging issues funding this year to help support childcares that are struggling to make ends meet. And so we are working with all the local childcares to make sure that they are sustainable and kept whole, as we are awaiting a new provincial funding formula that we've been anticipating for a couple of years, and we understand will come out in effect for 2025. So at this point in time, the answer is we are working with all the providers to make sure that they can be kept whole.
And I appreciate that. I don't think that would be an easy job, so thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to staff. What percentage of daycare spaces would be at the $10 rate?
If you give me a second, I can look it up. Just one sec.
Okay.
I can tell you that all but 2 childcare centers in the city of Brantford and the county of Brant are participating in the program. And so,
When they participate in the program, are all their spaces at $10?
yes. So if a
Okay.
childcare is a CWOC funded childcare, then all the spaces for children 0 to 6, that only applies for children to 0 to 6.
Okay, thank you. That's,
I'm going to say it's at least 90%.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Now, this is from the funding that the federal government gave to the provincial government, $13.2 billion in federal money to the province. Was the province before this funding giving some money towards daycare funding?
Absolutely. So the province funds a piece of childcare. The $10 a day program is through federal funding through to the
Yeah,
province. through
And
to
so as the
us.
province's share, since the federal government threw in 13.2 billion, have they reduced their share by taking the federal money and then maybe enriching their coffers by reducing their share of what they funded towards childcare? I.e. the 10% reduction or the reduction for administration?
Through the chair, I don't know that answer. I'm sorry.
So has our provincial funding been reduced beyond, well, you wouldn't know because it would be mixed.
Yeah, through the chair, our provincial funding is being reduced for in the administrative funding stream. But I can't tell you if that's being combined into the CWOC funding. So I can't
see.
tell you where that comes from.
That would take a little bit of work to look at. The other one would be the 10% reduction in administration costs for all childcare funding. That is the Ontario and the federal government's agreement, or the Ontario government's agreement, the federal government's agreement to accept the funding in the first place. Is it the same in all provinces, that is 10% administration reduction? So that administration costs reduce to 10% across the country?
The 10% administrative cost funding is not related to the $10 a day childcare. That is a different funding stream. So the funding, we have a number of funding streams. And so say the early on in the Indigenous led funding stream, we are funded at 10% admin. This is our core childcare funding. So that's related to the fee subsidy program, administration of fee subsidy program, administration of service system, service agreements with childcare, supporting childcares, and service system management and planning. That is being reduced from 10% to 5%. The $10 a day, which is the CWOC program, we're not funded on a percentage basis. We're funded on a per space basis, and it works out to about 2%.
For administration?
Yes.
So okay, so that's the big change. And then you're working with all those agencies, 90% of them that are doing the $10 a day daycare in order to see how they're making out with their administration, see how they could meet those targets.
So we work very closely with all of our programs to try and work together to be as efficient as possible. So we, put everything into a pot. So overall, we spend our children's services budget, we spend 4% of our budget on administration.
Okay,
overall.
thank you for that clarification. That's very helpful that you did that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other first time speakers? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Miller. You want to make an amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, in light of the delegations this morning, MPP Bauma wasn't aware of what was going on as far as the funding reductions to administrative services. So I would just make a very simple recommendation that we also CC his office on this report.
Do I have a second? Do I have a seconder? Yes, thank you. Apparently it's already there. think item C, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I do not have the report for me.
so-
I'll just bring my notes.
The intent was good and it was foreseen, so we don't need to worry about that. If there's no further discussion, I'm going to call the vote.
All those in favor of item 5.3, childcare funding update? That carries. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of items for consideration and consent, and brings us to resolution. I know it's been a long morning, Rose. It's a long day. There is one resolution today. Councillor Oakley, can you state your seconder and read your resolution?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll be seeking a seconder from the floor. Whereas there is the strong urgent need to improve the availability of affordable housing in the city of Brantford and County of Brant, and whereas publicly owned lands appropriate for housing development within the city of Brantford and County of Brant are limited, and whereas acquiring additional development-ready lands is unduly costly, and whereas infill development and urban intensification are desirable to reduce infrastructure costs and promote walkable communities, and whereas maximizing the building heights and density of municipally led affordable housing developments to increase the number of units constructed can assist both municipalities in meeting their housing goals. And whereas our strategy for large scale affordable housing builds is to ensure complete communities is to fill out builds with units that are across the spectrum of fully subsidized to market rate rental housing, and that this strategy has been effective. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the city of Brantford and the county of Brant commit to fully explore opportunities to increase height and density of municipally-led residential affordable housing projects where appropriate, and that the city of Brantford and county of Brant direct staff to require future municipally-led affordable housing developments that sit on sufficient lands, meet traffic study requirements, and have sufficient servicing to have an initial build design presented that is a minimum of 10 stories in height and surpass that height where possible. And that the city of Brantford and the county of Brant direct staff to require these aforementioned taller builds to have units across the affordability and attainability spectrum to ensure a complete internal community in addition to the larger community of the neighborhood that they reside in, and that the city of Brantford and county of Brant look for opportunities to implement the housing goals contained in the city of Brantford and county of Brant's official plans, the Brantford Housing Stability Plan, and any other relevant plans and policies regarding land use, intensification, and residential development.
I think Councillor Carpenter, you seconded that motion. So thank you. Councillor Oakley is very good at writing long motions. So this one needed to be read out. It's a very complex motion. So any discussion? I see Councillor Sless, you'd like to come in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, is there anything in this resolution that we're not doing now?
Councillor Sless, we are always trying to maximize density as possibly can, but there are many things we're not doing now. Yes, the second recital on the therefore is this would require us to basically to build a 10-story in heights buildings for any new development we're looking at. So for instance, on Sheller Lane, we'd have to it would require us to look at building a 10-story height, almost equivalent to Lorne Tower or Brant Tower. So no, we're not doing this at the moment. We try to conform with our planning and what conforms with that neighborhood.
Would the financial enter into this? It's fine to say we want to build a 10-story building, but if we don't have money to build a 10-story building, does that mean that the money we do have that would build a 5-story building doesn't get spent until we have enough to build a 10-story building? I don't quite follow the logic.
Yes, we wouldn't build, our finance department has a policy, we don't build unless we have the money to build, so, which is a good policy, wouldn't fight with Joel. But it's a good policy to have, and, yes, it would hold up some of the developments as well, and it would also probably hold up some of the development through our planning group as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brian. Having heard that, Mr. Chair, I won't be supporting the resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. Mayor Davies.
Yeah, following along with Councillor Sless, question not only for Mr. Hutchings, but I'd like to hear from housing staff, Housing Director Mary Musson, and also we have our planning director here, Nicole Wilmot, who's at the back. If they could respond, please provide us with their input in respect to this resolution. And I have a question to the county members. Where is the 10-story build going to be in the county? And in particular, in Ward 2 in Paris? Can you tell us where that will be?
Let's take staff input first, and then I'll pass you back to Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair, thank you for asking the question. Firstly, from a housing perspective, we do have a need for healthy and balanced communities. So prescribing minimum building sizes may lead to over-intensification in certain areas, and this can lead to further consequences such as social and behavioral concerns that require enhanced services such as security and police. So I do want to bring people's attention to 5 Marlene Avenue. That is only a 30-unit building, and there were significant challenges at the onset of operationalization of that building, and we would have similar growing pains, especially with a larger scale building. Larger developments may also lead to a lack of community connection and feelings of belonging. So large-scale public affordable housing developments in the mid-20th century really fostered concentrations of low-income families, which had negative impacts for both the public housing residents and the adjacent neighborhoods. So intensifying and inadvertently isolating affordable housing by limiting minimum building size can limit opportunities for the upward mobility among residents, and it might actually promote a culture of endemic poverty, hopelessness, and despair. And we really do need to maximize the limited supply of available lands. So prescribing minimum building sizes may lead to missed opportunities of affordable housing, such as the fourplex at 18 Sturton, where we were able to build 4 units of affordable housing. In neighborhoods with low affordable housing, the introduction of smaller mixed income buildings can really jumpstart the process for bringing about the diversity and affordability and balance while mitigating some of the community's concerns like the not in my backyard.
So through the chair to Mayor Davies and committee, my name is Nicole Wilmot. I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services. So just in addition to Mary's comments, and I think some of the comments that we heard today, requiring or restricting a minimum of a 10-story build, I think is rather restrictive. We need to review compatibility for size, height, and density based on site conditions. The province does direct municipalities to build more densely, to build more compact and to intensify development simply from the perspective of planning for the increase in population growth that we are anticipating within the city of Brantford, and not to the same extent, but similarly in the county of Brant. So this is a policy, this is a directive from the province that we look to do that. And so I would agree that, requiring builds to be 10 stories or more would likely be inappropriate on several parcels of land until we can actually review the conditions of those sites and actually probably deter a lot with respect to the financial components, making some of those builds viable.
And through the chair, one more point. If we do look at limiting building sizes, this will limit the development locations of affordable housing, which ultimately impacts households' choices of unit selections. So choices that influence housing decisions for most people include the proximity to work, neighborhood amenities, the quality of schools, and the perceived safety. So the choice factors for people who need affordable housing are no different, and affordable housing should be located to appropriate retail, daycare, high quality schools, recreational opportunities. And if they limit the stories of buildings, we're limiting people's choices of where they can live.
Thank you. Do you want to make any response?
Certainly. Through the chair, first to respond to Mayor Davis's comment about where in Ward 2. Personally, this actually directly come from, I believe that our current Trillium Way build, while certainly the first investment in affordable housing in Paris since 1980, whenever the last Trillium Way building was built, I believe it was a lost opportunity. They were only building 5 stories. Just across the road, there's 2 different 10-story buildings. I believe it was a missed opportunity and a lack of ambition there when we have a significant housing crisis right now, an affordability crisis. In terms with some of the comments back from staff, specifically the mid-century developments oftentimes lump together people all in a certain degree of subsidization. The model that we're following with Trillium Way and that I would be suggesting here is that we have a wide range of units and affordability metrics in there to build that complete community. Furthermore, my own interpretation of my language would be that this wouldn't intrinsically restrict builds like for Stinton, where there quite frankly isn't the room to build a 10-story building. In regards to the NIMBY concerns, where this might be a concern if it's in the middle of a subdivision, I have to imagine that the traffic study requirements would not be surpassed to have 100 units in there with 150 cars on a suburban street. So I don't see where that's restrictive there. The intent with this is, as Councillor Sluss highlighted, it might mean that we are delayed in working on any one individual project, but the idea is that in order to hit our target cap of, I believe, another roughly 500 units over the next 6 years, rather than needing to find 6 pieces of property with 50 units apiece, we can instead find 1 or 2 properties and build them to have 100 to 150 units apiece, which should also come with cost savings measures just based on there's fixed costs with any build.
Thank you, Councillor Oakley. I have Councillor Howes next, then Councillor Sikoli, and then Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Councillor Oakley. I respect the spirit in which this resolution was created. I have a question or two and a concern. In the resolution part, in section A, the word is explore, which I think is a good word. In section B, in the first sentence, it says staff, the city and the county direct staff to require future municipally led, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm struggling with explore versus require. And explore to me says if there is an opportunity, we certainly like the idea of going with more intensification. But in section B, the word require is causing me concern. I'm thinking about Trillium in our ward. If that building was 10 stories high, that would be great. We would fill every unit tomorrow if it was 100 units instead of 50. And I understand the spirit and trying to make that happen. But if making it 10 stories instead of 5 made it $30 million instead of 15, and if that caused the project to delay 5 or 6 years until we had $30 million, that causes me concern. So I'm a little worried about the require word, and I'm wondering if you might consider a friendly amendment in section B to change the word require to also be explore, and that way the intention is clearly shown, but it's not prohibiting us from doing other builds for a variety of reasons. I'd be interested in your response on that, please.
Yeah, Councillor Howes, just for clarity, I can't find the word require in section B. I'm missing it. Is it before the direct? Are you directing staff to explore?
As I read it, Councillor Bell, in section B, that the city of Brantford and county of Brant direct staff to require future municipally led affordable housing developments that sit on sufficient lands, et cetera, et cetera.
And your friendly amendment, just to repeat it again, please.
To change the word require to explore, which would then match the explore line used in the A section.
Councillor, would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Howes. Councillor Sikoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few comments. I will always support growth and development, but it has to be responsible and neighborhood appropriate growth, especially where affordable housing is concerned. And I have some concerns that not only do we not have the financial capacity to always build 10 stories, I do think staff has done a great job with maximizing each and every one of our builds to the best of our financial and abilities to maximize what we can do on these lands. So I have a hard time supporting anything really that's going to create red tape or throttle us from moving forward when we're looking at building affordable housing. And Councillor Howe's sort of touched on this, and it's a huge focal point of my concern is if we're taking a 15 million build and saying, well, now it has to be 10 or 15 stories, because this says a minimum of 10 stories. And that's going to delay us 5 or 10 years from being able to construct that tower. What's our wait list going to be in 5 or 7 years down the road when we finally have the financial ability to build what we're committing to? So I just think we're going to be, a hamster in a wheel with this policy in place. So while I can appreciate the spirit of this resolution and where it's coming from and making sure that we're maximizing what we can do, we've seen resolutions like this before that I felt would create red tape or throttle us in moving forward. I did not support that, and I'm not going to be supporting this tonight, but I do thank you for putting the energy into creating this and planting the seed in staff's minds to make sure that we're maximizing where we can. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Carpenter, then Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I seconded this to support the Councillor Oakley in his endeavors here to bring forward the intensification, but we are doing this now. B is too restrictive, and so what I'm suggesting is, as the seconder, that the mover agreed to take B completely out of the resolution, which is the restrictive piece, and the rest we're already doing, but passing it to verify that we're doing it is not a bad idea to talk about intensification, but B is the restrictive language that restricts what staff can and cannot do. So if the mover would agree to take B out, I think that we could find all of us could then support a resolution that talks about intensification.
Councillor Oakley?
Given the angle of the conversation, I will take out B or separate the clause to be voted on separately, whichever works with the procedural bylaw.
I would rather remove it as a seconder, but then it's if the mover is agreeable.
Certainly.
So
Okay, so
we
B
are
is-
removing it.
So it's removed. Thank you.
Yep.
So it's just A, C, and D we're voting on. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's more palatable for the community and for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I believe there's a limit on the number of units that are recommended for affordable housing to prevent the ghetto effect of too many rent geared income units in one location. Would this compromise that ideal?
Through the chair, yes, if we were building to 10 stories, then that would compromise it. Ideally, we keep units around the 50 unit build, and that gives a healthy community.
Okay, and by mixing in market rent units with the rent geared income, would that alleviate that, or would that still be a problem?
Through the chair, absolutely, and that is the model that we are following. Since the John Noble Apartments, we have been following a mixed income model to ensure that we have a variety of income levels within a build.
And would that allow a 10-story building to be mixed with market rent and rent geared income to prevent the ghetto effect, or would that still be a problem?
Through the chair, I can't really assume what would happen, but however, for a 10-story building, there would be an increased number of rent geared to income units and an increased number of affordable units. So being able to rent at market rents would be much more difficult.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Davies.
Yeah, I have concerns about one size fits all solutions to, I think, a legitimate issue, which is how we're across Southern Ontario using land for housing construction. And I think the provincial government and most municipalities are committed to increasing the density and doing so in such a way that you're still trying to maintain some integrity and some continuity in terms of what occurs in various neighborhoods. fact, our official plan here in Brantford, and now we're working on our zoning plan, very substantially increases the density across Brantford. And I think it's interesting what does the data say? How does the data say we're doing? And there is, every year there's a report, it's called BMA, and 121 municipalities across Ontario participate. They retain an independent consulting agency, BMA, to do the kind of comparison of municipality to municipality. How are you doing in comparison to your comparator municipalities? And it's a report that came out about a month ago. It's like 500 pages thick. There is a section that talks about density. And I'm pleased to tell you that Brantford, of the 121 municipalities, rates 20th in terms of density, 1,130 people per square kilometer. And I think that compares pretty well in terms of where we sit in terms of population. We're about 29th in the province, 28th, 29th. So you'd kind of expect us to be at 29th or 28th, but actually we're at 20th and we're improving and aspiring to do better than that. The county of Brant's about 82nd at 51 persons per square kilometer. But then again, there's a very large rural component to the county. So in terms of if the goal here is to increase density, which saves farmland, makes more efficient use of land, we're already doing that. Certainly, I can't speak for the county of Brantford, but certainly the city of Brantford, it was reflected in our official plan. It's reflected in the zoning bylaw, which increases very substantially the height of apartment towers in the city where that's appropriate, not everywhere. So I'm concerned that this, particularly paragraph B, takes this one-size-fits-all solution, which won't fit in some neighborhoods, and in fact could create a lot of resistance to the city and the county building housing. Because you got to remember, it has to be generally acceptable to the community. And if you're building buildings that don't meet with the community's norms and standards, you'll get a lot of resistance, which won't help as we try to expand our housing quota. So although I can certainly support an aspirational goal of increasing density where appropriate, I can't support a one-size-fits-all solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sless.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the other thing we haven't talked about in the discussion is sustainability. And I think I just heard staff say with that dense of a development, you're not going to have much luck selling market rent apartments to folks to rent because of the size and the I guess the quantity of social housing that would be in a development of that size. So I'm not sure. It took a long time for us to finally get a formula of a balance of different rental types and market rent being certainly a big component of that in any build that allows it to be sustainable as opposed to going back every year looking for more dollars as far as operational and capital. So I really have a lot of concerns with this. I think that the spirit, the intent is good, but I think if you think about it a little longer, there's a lot of pitfalls here, and I think perhaps we're creating more problems than we're solving. So again, I'll I guess reconfirm my non-support for this resolution, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. Any final comments, Councillor Oakley? If not, then I'm going to call the vote.
Recorded vote, please.
Call the recorded vote.
When I call your name, you can state your position. Mayor Davis?
No.
Councillor Secoli is absent. Councillor Celeste?
No.
Councillor Martin?
No.
Councillor Carpenter?
Yes.
Councillor Samwell?
No.
Mayor Bailey?
No.
Councillor Bell?
No.
Councillor Oakley?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
No.
And Councillor House?
Yes, that's as amended, right, Kristen?
That's as amended, yes, correct.
Yes.
And that item fails on a recorded vote of 3-2-7.
Thank you for bringing that forward, councillor Oakley. That brings us to notices of motion, of which there are none, and then straight into the adjournment of this Social Services Committee meeting. Following us, there will be a Brantford Municipal Non-Profit Housing Corporation Board of Directors meeting. It will commence in a few minutes. Brant councillors are excused. I'll just take that opportunity to say thank you to staff, and Brian is waving at me. Thank you very much. I do apologize. Yeah.
We'll give an update on Sunriseville, one from the client perspective, and one from the infrastructure perspective. Go ahead, Donna, on the residents.
Thank you. Through the chair, Donna Kirschnoff, Manager of Housing Operations. On January the 13th, we had a fire at 11 Park, which is also known as Sunrise Villa in Burford. This complex is a 12-unit, 100% RGI senior complex. The fire started in one of the units and quickly spread through the ceiling. All of the tenants were evacuated from the building and were supported through the evening. Red Cross did respond right away. And we were able to house all the tenants either through leaving the complex and staying with family members or going to a local hotel. Shortly thereafter, on the Monday, staff were able to meet with every one of the tenants that were affected by the fire. And we were able to ensure that they each had temporary accommodation, either through extended stays at the hotel or through accommodation through any type of insurance policy that they did have. So we did recognize that approximately it was a 50-50 split in terms of the tenants that did have insurance and the tenants that didn't have insurance. All tenants have been supported. The tenants with insurance were able to stay a little bit longer at the hotels. And we quickly mobilized and we were able to accommodate some of the tenants by moving them into vacant units. For those that needed supports, the community came together very quickly and we were able to garner some donations to be able to furnish their apartments for them and to get some clothing. When the tenants did leave, some of them left with their pajamas only. We were able to allow them back into the units to be able to gather some personal belongings. But then there were some units that were heavily smoke damaged. And so the belongings that they do have will either have to be cleaned. If for those that have insurance coverage, that should be covered or replaced. And then those tenants that do not have insurance, we're still working with them to see what alternative supports are available to them. So we continue to work with them on a regular basis. We're in constant contact with them and they are being supported.
Through the chair, yeah, I'll speak about the building itself. The one unit was heavily destroyed and affected two other units. Luckily, the building is in such a configuration that only 50% of the units, so 6 of them, were largely affected by smoke. The remaining 6 had some light smoke damage, but mostly it was it can be remediated through just washing and cleaning. Right now, Service Master is isolating the building, so we hope that it can operate at 50% capacity while the remaining half is restored. Right now, we are just about to get the engineer's report on what has to be done to restore it. And we are slightly delayed by the tenants' insurers wanting to conduct their own fire investigation for their own due diligence. But that is wrapping up, and we hope once we have the engineering report that we can move quickly to restore half the building, get those tenants back into the 6 units, and then have an action plan to restore the remaining 6.
Thank you for that. Any questions, Councillor Miller?
Just one question. There's some people that are trying to raise funds and donations and whatnot. I think who would be the best person on staff to coordinate that with? Would it Donna or Clayton or somebody else?
Through the chair, I would be the contact, and then I would be able to redirect any of those individuals to the housing stability worker who has been supporting this fundraising and collecting the donations.
Okay, yeah, okay, I will do that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, and apologies for missing that. But thanks again to staff for another very intense and long meeting, and I will now call it adjourned. I'm trying to adjourn this meeting, and Councillor Martin, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. You said some of the tenants have insurance. Why is insurance not a requirement for tenancy?
Tenant insurance is a requirement as per the lease agreement. However, it's not something that is followed up with on a regular basis. And tenants, once they do move in, they will cancel their insurance without, letting us know. It's not something that we have the ability. There's no, if for rent geared to income units, when someone doesn't provide information, it's legislated, then we're able to take away their subsidy. In this case, if someone doesn't have if they don't have tenant insurance, there's no repercussion.
Is proof of insurance something that you ask for annually?
No, it is not currently.
Maybe that's something you might want to consider then.
Thank you.
Third time of asking. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
We have quorum unless your name's quorum.
All right, so I'll call the Brantford Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation Board of Directors meeting for February 7th to order. And the roll has been taken, clerk?
The roll has been taken.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for anything on today's agenda? Seeing none. There are no presentations or delegations for today's meeting. Are there any items that the board wishes to separate for discussion purposes? Councillor Carpenter?
4.1, which is the only item on the agenda, other than the minutes.
All right. Perfect. Any other separations? No. So shall we do the minutes first then? Pardon? Thank you. Yeah. We'll call the question on that then.
All those in favor of item 5.1, the minutes from September 6th? And that's carried. Thank you.
Perfect then. So item 4.1, and we'll start with you, Councillor Carpenter, since you separated that.
Yes, this building entirely owned, responsibility of the housing authority? The entire building, the housing authority responsibility?
Through the chair, both the Beckett Building and Brandland Meadows are all part of the Brantford Municipal Nonprofit Corporation.
Right, so that's why it brings me to my question. So the lease terms for, renting the lease at market rents for some of the commercial space. Then you've got the 18,000 square feet at $1 per year to, which is another department of the city, which would be Mr. Cox's department and the in the Parks and Rec. So why are we taking a municipal profit building and then giving space away for next to nothing to another department? Why wasn't that department paying market rents for that space? And I know it operates a good community center and then senior center, and that's all good and well. Why are we not separating the financing and the rent of that? I know it's an in and out, but it still affects the value of the not-for-profit.
Multi-prong answer. Number one, history. It was when it was originally built, that's what the arrangement that was done. So we're following some history on when we're talking about the second floor with the dollar. We could do that. You're right. It would be an in and out. So it would increase Rick Cox's cost, but it would also increase the revenues coming into the not-for-profit housing corporation. So we could change that. We had some internal discussion. We decided to stay with history. On the first floor, why we're charging market rents is because we get subsidies back by both the province of Ontario for the Ontario Works Administration, because that's where we moved everybody from one market over across the street to the Beckett Building, the main floor. And number two, there's a cost sharing with the county. So that's why that's officially, so we'll get those third of that back from the county and also some, I think about 20% back from the province of Ontario.
So for the history, are we not bound as directors of a municipal not-for-profit housing corporation to get full value for everything? Like, can we subsidize someone else? And can we do that legally? Maybe it might have been the history, but is that something we can do legally as a not-for-profit, subsidize another entity? That's why I raised the question. It just seems concerning.
Yeah, my lawyer has just left the room. So I can't give that legal advice. I do have a law degree, but I'm not a lawyer and I can't give that legal advice to you. But we can look into that, get back to you, Councillor Carpenter, but you are right from a two-hatter system. You're right now you're sitting as a member of the Brantford Municipal Not-for-Profit Housing Corporation. And you should have that hat on, and that's what you should be. You might go on the other side, council in a month, and you may say, no, we shouldn't be charging that because, and that's actually, and a reviewing stuff that actually is legit. But right now, as a housing corporation, you should be saying, or you could be saying, we should be charging market rent. You're exactly right.
So, so this would provide more funding for the not-for-profit, for the other units that we have to maintain, lower those costs, and provide more money for additional housing if we want to build it under this umbrella. And I have to wear my hat as a member of this not-profit housing corporation board of directors. So I'm going to separate those two items so I can vote accordingly, Madam Chair, because I don't think I can vote to give money away while wearing a not-for-profit hat. I don't think it's my responsibility to do that. And if it comes to council, when it comes to council, maybe we'll have the answer about how we could do that. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The report talks about the arrears for the two buildings, and Brandland Meadows, it's quite high. Are the tenants that are in arrears on assistance? And if they are they on pay direct?
They're receiving assistance. However, at this time, they're not receiving their subsidy because they have not complied with their renewal process. So that means that we're missing documentation, so they've went up to market rent. Therefore, they have paid direct from whatever support program, either OW or ODSP. They're paying the rent, but they're not paying the difference between the RGI amount and the market amount. Therefore, that's where we have the arrears. Once the documentation is received, we will readjust the account. We call those ghost arrears because they'll go away because we reinstate the subsidy.
The subsidy would be retroactive back to?
Absolutely, yes.
And do you expect most of these people to requalify?
Most cases, yes.
And if they don't, do you continue to?
So we would proceed through the landlord tenant board, but concurrently, we would also have strong supports through the housing stability worker program for eviction prevention.
Okay, so you'd put them on a payment plan where you'd take a little more than the rent on the pay direct and until they get caught up?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question with the items separated as Counselor Carpenter asked.
So the first vote we're going to do is for item I, the use of approximately 18,000 square feet for a 3-year term. Pardon me.
Recorded, please.
So we'll do a recorded vote on the first item. So Counselor Carpenter,
No.
Counselor Celeste,
Yes.
Counselor Martin,
Yes.
Mayor Davis is not in, Counselor Secoli,
No.
and Counselor Samwell.
Yes.
And that that passes 4-2. Thank you. And now we will do the second agreement
Sorry,
for,
did you say 4-2? You mean 3-2?
no, we have Counselor Celeste, Counselor Martin. Oh, yep, sorry. I am so sorry. It fails on a tie.
It passes 3-2.
Be 3-2.
For the record, it's 3-2 and it passes. Thank you. We will do the second one. Counselor Carpenter,
Yes.
Counselor Celeste,
Yes.
Counselor Martin,
Yes.
Counselor Secoli,
Yes.
and Counselor Samwell.
Yes.
And that carries. And now as the whole as amended, I'll do a recorded again. Counselor Carpenter,
Yes.
Counselor Celeste,
What was amended?
do I not have to,
The balance of the resolution.
the balance of the resolution? Counselor Carpenter,
Yes.
Counselor Celeste,
Yes.
Counselor Martin,
Yes.
Counselor Secoli,
Yes.
and Counselor Samwell.
Yes.
And that carries.
All right. And with that, I believe we're adjourned.